Brad and Dan talk shite.
Welcome, dear listener, to the creme de la creme of health-based podcasts. The irony of which is not lost on us, as this podcast is made by one guy who cannot tolerate dairy products and the other who has such an unhealthy relationship with them that he can often be found in the cold section of his local supermarket emptying 2 cans of squirty cream into his mouth simultaneously, tears rolling down his rosy red cheeks while he shouts at passers-by to stop staring at him while he tries to drown his shame in pressurized bovine lactations. I am joined as ever by the crown prince of positivity himself, offering the yin to my miserably bleak yang. Brad, how the devil is your shit, sir?
Hey Dan, man, my shit's doing good, thanks. As we've been discussing over the last several episodes, it's a new, some we would call magical time in our lives. We are
I as came across in that intro, I find every day a magical day.
well,
I'm
I'm kind of jealous now.
full of magical wonder.
I'm gonna have to go to a supermarket and drown myself in some cheese and tears. I kind of jealous of that.
Just rub cheese slices on your face while drowning in double cream.
I'll get my wife to do it along with me because she
that
has
becomes a very different experience.
she's got dairy intolerance issues, and now because of baby, she can have dairy. And boy, is she going to town. She is taking this.
I didn't realize I'd written that intro about your wife, but somehow I've managed to shoehorn her in there.
You basically did. Like last night we had a Valentine's dinner, made a nice homemade pizza, and we put all the cheese. I mean, all the cheese on it.
There is nothing left in the town in which you live in because you just ate all of it.
Exactly. So we had that, and today we're gonna go do a round 2 of our ultrasound to hopefully, possibly find out our baby's gender. So we've been looking forward to that. That's
excellent. That's very exciting.
It is exciting, and then we have all the planning that comes after that.
Yeah.
In health news, I'm doing okay. I've got a bit of a, one could say, like not a scary heads up, but I've been told my liver hasn't been functioning too well for the last, let's just say, since surgery.
You need to knock those 8:30 a.m. vodkas on the
right
head. That's where the issue is.
I guess I'm gonna have to quit.
Yeah, maybe.
But
stop with the 3 bottles of Jack a day.
I'm putting that mostly aside. I'm not too, like, I'm concerned, but I'm trying to keep it on the side while
I think, yeah, I mean, this is a difficulty I think anyone has, let alone anyone with chronic illness. So as soon as you're told, as soon as you're aware you have this, but this could lead to this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
And this blood test could mean this, and that could mean this, and this could mean this. You can only deal with the hand that is dealt before you.
100%.
You know, if you open a packet of paracetamol and you look at the potential side effects, it goes on for days. So, you know, you're taking paracetamol and you could think, look, I'm going to go into liver failure because I've taken paracetamol. Well, no, you're not. It's just it has been reported in the past.
Yeah.
So I know your bloods or whatever are slightly out, but let's try and remain positive because
yes.
Let's be honest. If you're not positive, this podcast is become a very, very dark place.
No, I'm keeping positive, and I'm also just like in the mentality of I'm focused on my wife and the pregnancy. That's like in the long scheme of things, I am okay. Like I'm better than I've ever been still. So this is just a little drip in the water. We'll take care of it. It's all good. But
you got this, dude.
That leads me to, Dan, how was your shit?
I am absolutely fucking exhausted. So my day today started at 3 a.m. I drove for 260 miles. I did
insane.
A day's work, and then I drove for 260 miles back. I had about an hour to prepare for this podcast, and I am quite literally delirious at the moment. I can see long dead relatives at the other side of this laptop just waltzing away. Yeah.
You're gonna need
So
a bit of a rest up after this, that's for sure.
yeah, I'm going to need a rest, but the thing is, I've ingested so much caffeine today. I've got more caffeine in my veins than blood right now. So I know full well. So this is a transatlantic podcast, if no one could pick that up from the accents. I'm in the north of England, you're in Canada, so there's, 8 hours between us?
Yep.
So where I am right now is 10 to 9 in the evening. We could finish in 30 minutes time, an hour's time, 90 minutes time, whatever. I know if I go to bed after that, I will just be bing, wide awake because
Yep.
there is so much caffeine racing through me right now. My heart is going 1,000 miles an hour. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what kind of a train wreck of a human I am tomorrow. Other than that, I have entered. I don't know if I mentioned this on the last podcast. I've entered into a 10K race
Good.
to raise money for my local hospice. Which is, do you have hospices over in
Yeah.
Canada?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I have no knowledge of the world outside of Yorkshire. So a friend of the show and a friend of mine, Tom, who was going to be on one of our previous episodes, but that got curtailed because he ended up having to go into the hospice. He's coming home from there today.
Oh, that's good.
And he's been really well looked after. So it popped up. In fact, no, someone ran past me in the village with the Wakefield Hospice 10K T-shirt on. I thought,
Oh.
I can't not partake in that. So raising money there.
Awesome.
And yeah, feeling generally good / delirious / exhausted / high on frappuccinos.
Excellent.
So that kind of brings the end to the intro. So our guest today is a Mr. Michael Webb. Now, Michael, bless him, um, he's had a triple crown of chronic illnesses.
Indeed.
Like myself, he suffers from ulcerative colitis, but as we've kind of covered that before, we're going to kind of ignore that to a certain extent. He's a type 1 diabetic, and he's been diagnosed with that since he was 10 years old.
A long time.
He has another disease I can't pronounce, I'm not even going to try, but it's to do with his liver. He can tell us all about it. So we'll speak to Michael in a second.
All right, let's go talk to Mike.
Brad and Dan talk shite.
Hi, Michael. Welcome to the show. How the devil are you?
Hello, glad to be here. Doing too bad actually, considering.
We
About
like
yourself?
that. We like not too bad. That's always a good start to any to any conversation. So, how am I doing? I am physically and mentally exhausted, but getting by, as we do. So, Michael, I think the best way to start is for you to give us a little introduction about who you are and why you're talking to us today.
Sure. Well, I'm Michael. Um, I'm 39 years old, and I was diagnosed type 1 diabetic at the age of 10 back in 1994.
Right.
Today, 19th of May, which coincidentally is World IBD Day.
That's well planned. Well
Yeah,
done.
exactly.
That's the
Exactly.
kind of foresight we like.
Exactly. It's kind of ironic considering that I also have ulcerative colitis as well,
Right.
which was diagnosed Friday the 13th of April 2018.
You've
Again, the
really got these dates on point.
yeah,
So diabetes on World Diabetes Day, ulcerative colitis on Friday the 13th, and
yeah.
for the Triple Crown, it was
The
it's a
well, for the Triple Crown, The third condition, which is the most unique, there's about 5,000 in the whole UK.
Oh wow.
Wow.
It's called primary sclerosing cholangitis.
Okay.
From this point on, we'll just call it PSC,
Isn't it?
because there is no chance I'm getting that out on a regular basis.
To be honest, even myself, and I've had it 5 years now, even myself and the specialist have trouble trying to say it. So it, as I say, it usually gets shortened down just
Right.
As well, most things in the medical world do. The number of abbreviations you come across are staggering. So let's start then. Let's go chronologically. Oh, actually, sorry. The PSC. I know I'm going to say PCS and get it completely wrong at some point, even though it's 3 letters. When was that diagnosed? Was that on like Halloween or Christmas or Pancake Day?
No, that was strangely that was actually diagnosed in March of 2018, so just before my colitis.
Okay.
And usually, I mean, a lot of people with PSC do have one of the 2 forms of IBD, so either Crohn's or colitis.
Yeah.
And
Right.
the specialists, like both my gastro team and my hepatology, who look after my PSC, tell me that usually it's the other way around. Usually the IBD gets diagnosed first, and then the PSC gets diagnosed.
Ah. Okay.
So, yeah,
So
I was going to ask. I was going to ask a little bit about that later on. I thought we'd tackle things chronologically,
Okay.
and there's kind of a reason for this as well. In well, 2 of our previous episodes, we've talked a fair bit about ulcerative colitis and Crohn's because both Brad and I suffer from that condition. So, not to diminish that part of your health journey, I think we would do better to discuss your diabetes a little more first. And you've been living with that for quite
Yeah.
a while. So for full disclosure, my dad has type 1 diabetes too.
Oh, okay.
So he was diagnosed at the age of 17. Now, of that generation, so I'm rapidly encroaching upon 40. I'm 40 in 13 days.
Oh, dang.
Whatever it is. So my father's generation were the generation that spoke of nothing. They didn't talk about how their health was. They didn't talk about how their mental health was. They didn't even tell their children they loved them. But that's an entirely different podcast. So the question that I have for you, and this came from talking to my dear daughter, child 2, who is 12 years old. She wanted me to ask you the burning question, which is on the lips of all of our inner child, is being diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 10. How on earth did you cope with having sweets taken away from you?
well, to actually tell the secret, I still eat sweets and chocolate to this day at the age of 39, nearly 29.
Oh, good man. We appreciate people who dabble in contraband. Don't worry, that's
Yeah.
that's
Well,
tough work.
I mean, I've been type 1 diabetic 29 years
Yeah.
this coming May.
Yeah.
And the amount of times that I've been told, people have come up to me and they've seen me with like a bit of cake, or they've seen me with sweets, or they've seen me with chocolate, and they come up and I've got a type 1 diabetic tattoo on my left wrist,
Okay.
purely because I don't really get on with medical alert jewelry. But the amount of people that come up to me, whether they know me or not, and they see my tattoo and they see me eating something laced with sugar, and they say, "Why in the hell are you eating that? You're not allowed to eat it."
Right.
And they a lot of the time, like with any health condition, there's stereotypes that oh, you did this, so you've got that condition. You've done that because you this condition. You can't have this. You can't have that. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And it's one of the main stereotypes around diabetes is that purely it's diagnosed because I've eaten too much sweets and chocolates.
Yeah.
Sweet
Which,
chocolate.
yeah.
So it's caused diabetes. I mean, I'll come to that in a moment.
I was going to say, we'll get into that.
But since my diagnosis, apparently I'm not allowed to eat anything with sugar in it. I'm not allowed to eat nice food. I've basically got to eat. I've basically got to sit and eat vegetables for 3 meals a day.
Yeah. I think this question probably springs from a little bit of my ignorance as well, because, you know, growing up, my grandparents would always buy my dad sugar-free chocolate at Christmas.
Yeah.
Right.
And he detested it, and it would just sit there for 6 months until it went off, and then it gets thrown in the bin. And obviously, my dad is, you know, in his mid to late 60s now, so his experience is probably very different to yours. But again,
Totally.
we'll come on to that. But in terms of the type 1 versus type 2, Brad, you've got a question on this.
Well, yeah, I just want to know, like, you literally just pointed it out. I would say a lot of people, maybe not most, but a lot of folks, when they hear diabetes, automatically go to type 2, which is generally due to, as you said, having too much sweets, too much sugar, and it's kind of brought on through that. Or type 1 really is not. It's a chronic condition that is brought on earlier and isn't. I wouldn't say it's not your fault. It's not like, oh man, I sat here binging on sweets for years and now I've got diabetes. It has nothing to do with that. So I just
so one is eating too much cake. The other is just the cards that you're born with.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, there's multiple different variations of diabetes, like there is with colitis and with Crohn's.
Right.
I mean, like the analogy that I like to give is type 1 and type 2 diabetes are very much like Crohn's and colitis. They're under the same umbrella. They're both this very similar condition, but they're both completely unique in terms of the generation that they are diagnosed to and how they come about. I mean, I say, I was 10 years old when I was diagnosed type 1 diabetic. 19th of May 1994 it was. And there's no known cause for type 1 diabetes.
Right.
No.
It's somewhat, some say that it's possibly within your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in your genetic makeup that you're gonna live this amount of time. You're gonna go to bed. You're gonna then wake up the next morning and start developing one of the 4 symptoms.
Yeah, I mean, the human body is so bizarre like that.
Yeah.
So I used to, this is a complete aside, but I used to really, really, really love shellfish. And then I was on holiday when I was like 28 in France, and suddenly bit into a prawn one day, and my throat swelled up, and my tongue swelled up, and my face swelled up, and it was just like, there you go, you're done, buddy, no more prawns for you. So it was almost like there was a genetic countdown in my body. I don't know whether it was when you reach 1,354 prawns, you're going to have a reaction, or I don't know if it was like a timeline thing. But the same thing apparently happens with strawberries as well. And I just find it's such a cruel twist of the knife by our dear creator, if you believe in that sort of thing, that things like that happen, and things like, you know, type 1 diabetes appear in your case when you were 10, in my father's case when he was 17. I just want to touch on very quickly because, like I've said, we don't want to look at UC ulcerative colitis too much, but given that diet can be very restrictive with ulcerative colitis in terms of what you can eat and what you can't eat, and again, that's very personal to you. And as you've already said, diabetes can be very restrictive as well, although I suspect you're going to say it's not as restrictive as it once was. How has that affected your diet down the years?
Well, the one thing that when I was first diagnosed, I was obviously at the age of 10. It was a major, like any diagnosis of a long-term chronic condition. Um, it's it's life changing.
Mhm.
It's life altering. And at that age, the age of 10, nothing was explained to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
As
Yeah.
a 10-year-old, I had to learn it second, third, and fourth hand about how to control it. And
Thrown to the wolves,
I,
so to speak.
yeah, and it was only ever explained to my parents.
Yeah.
The doctors and the nurses for the first 3 or 4 years of my diagnosis, well, until I got to 16, when I went up to the adult diabetes clinics, nothing was explained to me.
Hmm.
I was told that I had that for my breakfast, I could only eat one slice of toast. For my lunch, I could only have 25 grams of carbs. For
Right.
my tea, my evening meal at 5, 6 o'clock, I had to eat a maximum 50 grams of carbs, no more, no less.
Oh, wow.
That was my diet, and I was only allowed to eat that each day.
Oh, jeez.
So that was from the age of 10 until 16,
Yes.
or beyond that.
Whew.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it was.
So obviously I'm similar age to you. I grew up in the same era of you.
We're all the same age.
Well, okay, same age, same geographical area, shall we say? There was, I didn't know anything about carbohydrates at the age of 10, 11, 12.
No.
Only seems to have been in my late 20s and 30s that seems to have become a thing. So, I mean, I feel for you, but I feel for your parents as well in that scenario. That's kind of like, I mean, obviously nowadays, for someone listening who's a bit younger, you have all your nutritional values on the back of the packets, but we didn't have that at all in the 90s. It was basically just...
That's a good point.
It's beige or it's vegetables. That was kind of the the choice you had. How did meal variations go then?
It was very bland the first few years.
To be fair, my memories of the early 90s were fairly bland anyway. It was the food wasn't particularly adventurous, but still. Sorry, carry on.
But I mean, like when I was in hospital with my diagnosis, I was in for 8 days in hospital, having to learn how to inject insulin.
Yeah, which must have been terrifying as a 10-year-old.
It was scary. You were given like an orange. You were given like a little vial of insulin, like that big, and you were given like the old one-use, one shot needles.
Yeah.
That were about 2 inches long, about half an inch thick. And I was given them, and the doctors and the nurses are like, there you go, practice injecting this orange.
That's
so bizarrely, that's actually how nurses are taught to inject initially in the nursing training.
I was thinking
you
of that
start
too.
by injecting into fruit, and then as an aside to that, you learn how to shave by shaving a balloon. So obviously, if you just
So you don't
shave
pop
people
it.
while they're in hospital, so you don't pop it, yeah. So go, Brad, you've got another question. I'm hogging the limelight. Sorry.
No, it's okay. You're talking about how being trained and that as a young kid being diagnosed at the age of 10. How has technology changed over the last 29 years? We were talking in your notes, you mentioned you're now using CGM, a continuous glucose monitoring
Yeah,
device. So like that's
I am. Yeah.
now versus then. How have we changed over these years?
Well, over the years, I mean, like the very first blood glucose monitor that I had, um, you would put like a couple of AA batteries in it.
Okay.
And it was huge. You remember like the old Nokia brick mobile phone?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
The
Snake.
the the monitor itself was that big.
Oof.
The meter was that big,
Okay.
and you'd have to turn it on, and it'd take like 2 minutes to warm up. Then you'd press a button. You'd have to put the test strip in the bottom of it, and
Hmm.
it would cycle around for 90 seconds, and then it would give you a countdown, and you'd have to prick your finger with the tester,
Yeah.
and literally drain your arm of blood to put onto this test strip, and then
Right.
you'd have another 2 minutes the result. So almost 4 minutes to find out what your blood glucose was.
Oh jeez.
And if you've gone hypo, so if your blood glucose level has gone under 4, and you're waiting 4 minutes to find out
Oh
what your
no.
blood glucose,
Yeah.
That's not
So
no matter,
good.
no matter who
the,
you are, you get face plant on the floor and fall unconscious. But now,
so sorry, Karen.
now I've got a CGM. I use a Freestyle Libra 2
Hmm.
sensor, which is actually just in my upper left arm
Yeah.
at the moment. And I've got an app on my iPhone. I can literally unlock my iPhone, can open up the app, the Freestyle Libra app.
Hmm.
I can press scan. I can literally, that takes about 2 seconds. I can then hold it up to where the sensor is on my arm.
Hmm.
A phone will vibrate to say, to acknowledge that it's scanned.
Okay.
And I can take the phone and look at it in less than 5 seconds and find out what my blood glucose level is.
Now that's
Yeah.
advancement.
It will tell me.
Does
It will,
does it alarm to let you know if you've gone hypo?
yes,
So it
it
does. Okay.
yeah, the Libra Freestyle Libra app, I can put settings into it to say like like if my levels go below 5,
Hmm.
I, personally, if it goes below 5, and if it goes above 13, make an audible noise, because I can then, with my insulin pump, I can then either correct hyper, bring it a couple of units of insulin in,
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
down, or I can go and eat something like a sandwich or a bit of cake or a bit of chocolate or something
Yeah.
to keep my levels
To bring it up. Yeah.
and keep it in that bracket of between 5 and 13.
Right.
So I guess that this is the you're probably in terms of chronic illness, diabetes has probably done extremely well out of technology um, in the last few years. So I remember as a child that my dad is 6'4", and how he would respond when he had a hypo was he would become very essentially like he's downed a bottle of Jack Daniels. He'd become very disoriented, quite belligerent, quite argumentative.
Right.
So as a child, it was terrifying if he went hypo. I absolutely hated it.
I could see
And
that, yeah.
at that moment in time, all you could do was get him to, like, say, do the finger prick test. Now, if you've got a 6'4" man and you're 8 years old in the house alone with him, and his blood sugar's gone down to 2.4, and he's suddenly swaggering round like Oliver Reed, trying to convince him that you know better is slightly terrifying. So the technology has absolutely, from my mind anyway, just dealing with my dad, has revolutionized diabetic care.
Hmm.
I mean, it's revolutionized the care to a point. Obviously, intervention hasn't changed so much. You're still just injecting insulin as the only treatment option, but at least your monitoring is far, far better.
Yeah.
So, on the back of Brad's question, I guess mine would be, so your daily routine, what is it now compared to what it was 20 years ago? So you talked about having to drain all the blood from your body to get a blood reading when you were 10 years old. So how often are you checking your blood now with the technology?
With the sensor, I can check it 50, 60, 70 times a day, depending on what kind of activity I do.
Just how bored you are.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. But yeah, I mean,
it's essentially like doom scrolling down Twitter, but you're just doing it with your blood sugar.
Yeah. But I mean, like one of the main hobbies that I have is I'm a 1940s reenactor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I during the spring and summer, so sort of like between about March and October, I travel all around the UK and occasionally into France, like when there's a big event for like Normandy, like D-Day and everything.
Yeah.
Obviously, because of the thickness of the uniform that I wear, it's half an inch thick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, breathable fabrics weren't really a thing in the 1940s, were they?
No, they weren't, unfortunately. I mean, like me having the sensor, the CGM in my arm, I can be walking around an event and I can think, oh, my levels don't feel quite right. So I can literally go into my pocket. I can palm my phone into my hand. I can unlock it discreetly. And I can literally put my hand up and scan the sensor in literally in the two blinks of an eye. I can look at it and I can think, oh, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's 8 point whatever.
Yeah. As previously, I imagine you'd have needed to find a quiet space to get your finger prick kit out and your sharps bin or whatever you needed. So slightly more usable these days.
Yeah, I mean, like even today, like 2023, there's still occasionally. I mean, I like to think that people have learned a lot about like diabetes and like health conditions in general, but still, very, very occasionally you come across someone that they'll see you sitting there and you're not looking too well.
Yeah.
They'll look at you and they see you like pouring with like dripping with sweat and looking like you're drunk and you're actually hypo.
Mm.
Yeah.
I remember the very first time I ever went hypo in public. I was walking down the street and there were two little old ladies in their 80s walking towards me. And I was literally staggering down the road. I was
Sorry.
I mean, I could never walk in a straight line anyway, but I was literally pinballing down the road.
Yeah.
Down the path. these two ladies saw me, and I nearly barged into them. And I stopped and I waited for them to go past me. They they looked at each other, looked at me, looked back at each other, looked back at me, and one of them said, "Oh, poor guy, he can't hold his drink. He's pissed."
And you felt like saying, I
Yes,
absolutely can hold my drink.
yeah,
It's a matter of pride at this point.
but she looked, the one talking, she looked straight at me and she said, "You're pissed, aren't you?" Literally, as I face planted on the floor.
Oh no.
To clarify, at that time, I was 12 years old.
Oh, for fuck's
And I
sake.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. That's
12 years
that's
old.
a whole different spin to it.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm more impressed that these old ladies were ripping the piss out of you for not being able to hold your booze at 12 years old.
Yeah.
That's astronomical.
I mean, at 39, I still can't hold my booze. Well, actually,
But that's
technically,
fine.
I can.
Yeah.
I mean,
But the idea that two old ladies would look at a 12-year-old and go, ha, pisshead, is slightly worrying. So let's fast forward to 2008. So, Brad, why don't you take over the story here?
Okay, so we're talking about the consequences of your diabetes getting out of control. You mentioned again to go for fun dates. You like to have things happen on let's just say dates that stand out. You went into diabetic, I'm going to try and say this, diabetic ketoacidosis during Christmas 2008.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you woke up in intensive care on Boxing Day. Now, do you even remember being taken to the hospital? And then B is just, what do you remember from your experience in general from that point?
Well, the first answer, the answer to the first part of that, I actually don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember the hospital.
Was it just was it just a terrible Christmas dinner that you were trying to get out of? Has that been leveled against you in the past?
It was initially just a joke from my parents, but now basically what had happened was, um, trying to keep the story as short as possible. At the time, I was living in Essex in England. I'm now living up in the northeast, so I was living um, about 90 minutes from the Dartford crossing to go between Essex
London way.
and I've been working in Kent for a week, looking after a load of horses. At the time, I was trying to get a full time job in a dressage yard. Didn't get the job purely because of this. But I was working down there, and after about the second or third day, I started feeling violently sick and being violently sick.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I've just eaten something that's disagreed with me.
The old food poisoning line that we all cling to whenever we seem to get ill.
Yeah, and I kept an eye on my levels, regularly checking. That's the one thing I always do whenever I feel even remotely unwell.
Right.
I'll constantly check, keep an eye on my blood glucose levels purely because of this event. My levels stayed fine until the day I went home.
Mm-hmm.
It was Christmas Eve, and I was in absolutely no position to drive. So my dad drove 3 hours down to Kent, came and picked me up, and it should have been a 3 hour journey.
Okay.
North Kent to South Essex. We set off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We didn't get home till nearly 11 p.m.
Ooh.
We were stopping literally every 5 miles for me to literally be sick,
Oh no.
bringing everything up. I was that well.
Eh,
I was literally dying of thirst.
oof.
I would have like a big like 2 liter bottle of water,
Mhm.
and I literally down that in seconds.
Jeez.
I would then need to urinate it out.
Mhm.
Actually, that'd be in a space of about 2 minutes.
Jeez.
Out of the toilet, and I think, Christ, I need another drink of water, and I drink another 2 liter bottle of water, and I'd have to go straight shades of eventually of my colitis diagnosis, literally in and out of the bathroom.
Right. So,
So anyway, I finally got home, and it took me 20 minutes to get out of the car
oh, damn.
from my house, and my mum was there, all 4'11" of her, and she's literally dragged me into my bedroom and laid me on my bed.
Super moms.
And yeah, and I was literally pounding on the door. I had no strength at all.
Yeah.
And pounding on the front door. I had no strength to even undo the handle to open the front door.
Now,
She opened the door.
I just want to interject one little bit. Yeah, I want you to keep going, but because we're talking about such a length of time, I just wanted to ask. So you're about 24 at this point?
About that, yeah, 20,
Okay.
24.
Okay. Now continue.
So anyway, my mum came to the front door. She opened the door, and she took one look at me, and this is one of only 2 times I'd ever heard my mum swear.
Wow.
The second time was on Boxing Day, but I'll come to that in a moment. She opened the door, took me up and down. She said, "Holy fuck, you look unwell."
Which is always a great greeting, I find.
Yeah, yeah, and that was the first. I'm still alert. I'm completely out of it, but I was still able to hold a conversation
Right.
despite being
Yeah.
so unwell. She said, "Holy fuck, you look unwell." To go straight through your bedroom. So with her help, I went through. About 10 minutes later, I needed to get up, not only to go to the toilet, but even another drink.
Mhm.
And we got a couple of these 1 pint plastic glasses,
Okay.
plastic cups, and I was making some dilutable orange juice. But normally I would only make one, and I can remember this, and I remember it so clearly. It's the last thing I remember until I came around on Boxing Day. I've got these two 1 pint plastic glasses sat on the worktop.
Mhm.
I poured a little bit of orange juice in at the bottom of them, and filled them up with water. And I'm shuffling back to my bedroom. I put them down on the counter. My mum walks into the kitchen, and she sees me literally, my knuckles white, turning white on my hands, where I'm struggling to hold on to the work surface. And she taps me on the elbow and she says, "Who are they for?" I didn't even look at her, and I said, "That one," pointing to the one on the left. I said, "That one's for me, and that one, the one on the right." I said, "That one's for Keith Moon."
Okay.
Okay.
Now,
Wow.
for those
That's
that don't know, Keith Moon was the drummer.
The Who. Okay.
yeah. Who's been dead for about 40 years at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this was 2008 when I said that. That one's for me. That one's for Keith Moon. Keith Moon had died 31 years previously.
Jeez.
So out of it that I thought that Keith Moon, the drummer from The Who, was in my bedroom talking with me.
So
I was that out of it.
I'm assuming at that point your parents sought medical help. And
I
if not, why not? That's
they
a hell of a trigger right there.
to be honest, I don't know whether they did or not. But so the story that I was told, and I've no reason to dispute this. Apparently, I went to bed. I drank both drinks, and apparently the very next morning, my mum, who'd woken up at 7 o'clock Christmas Day morning,
Hmm.
got up and she's walking past. She's walking by my bedroom door, um, and she's looked over to her left as she's walked past to go to the toilet. She stopped and she's had to do a double take, and I'm laying there, half in, half out of my bedroom door.
Right.
She's seen me laying there. She thought, "Is he all right?"
Uh-huh.
She's gone over and she started tapping me on the shoulder, and I'm just wearing a pair of shorts and a t-shirt,
Hmm.
and she's gone over and she's gone to tap me on the shoulder to see if I'm all right, knowing that I've been unwell.
Hmm.
Um, she got no response out of me, so she's grabbed hold of my arm, and she actually said to me in intensive care the next Boxing Day.
Hmm.
She said you were like a block of fucking ice.
Oh,
She
dang.
said she said I thought you were dead.
That must have been scary for her.
Yeah,
Hell of a Christmas
she,
present you offered up there.
yeah. She immediately phoned for an ambulance, and
Hmm.
she got me rolled onto my side just in case. She checked I was breathing, checked for a pulse. I was still alive.
Right.
She called 999 for an she said, my son's diabetic. He's unconscious on the floor. I can't wake him. And they usually send that as a category one
Okay.
category. Yeah. They sent a fast response doctor and three crewed paramedics. So I had four trained medics looking after me.
Oh.
I had mom, my dad, and my sister. So I had seven people. The doctor, literally 2 minutes after the phone call was made, came, took one look at me, touch, checked for a pulse and that.
Hmm.
Yeah, to go in. He immediately phoned through A&E, and they got me in. I was in Colchester General Hospital within 15 minutes, and
And that quick response probably saved your life.
yeah, and like I say, I was completely out of it, and I woke up. I'm not sure what time. I know it was Boxing Day.
Hmm.
Um, and I woke up and like any events you like when you've been unwell, you tend to think like, did that happen? Kind of
Yes.
thing. And I woke up and I'd got six double cannulas in my right arm.
Wow.
I'm right-handed, and even though I was completely unconscious, I don't remember doing this. They'd secured my right arm. They hadn't tied it tightly, but they'd secured my right arm loosely
Oh.
to the rail on the side of the bed because I was throwing my
Stop you
arms
from
about,
flailing around.
Right. Okay.
pulling them out. So I've got a double cannula left side of my inner elbow, another double on the right side of it. I had
Yeah.
a double on the left side of my inner wrist, double on the right side of my inner wrist. I had another one on the outside wrist, and I had a sixth one in the back of my hand. So I had two thoughts. I had six cannulas in one arm.
Yeah.
I've come round. Where am I? And I'm trying to, like anybody. First thing I did was I'm laying there, eyes are closed, and I've done this, and I couldn't get my right arm further closer to me than that.
Right.
Like, try and wipe my face, try and wake me up a little bit. One of the nurses, well, one of the doctors in the ward at intensive care came over, said, "Oh, you're awake then?" She said, "You scared the shit out of us when you came up." And I sort of croaked. I said, "Scared you? Imagine how the hell I'm feeling." What the hell happened? Where am I?
Right.
She said, "You're in intensive care in Colchester General Hospital." She leaned over and she said, "Technically, I shouldn't say this." She said, "But you're very lucky to be alive." She said, "The patient that was in that bed that you replaced came in with exactly the same thing." She said, "You went DKA." She said, "That patient," she said, "technically, I shouldn't be telling you this, but that person had a blood glucose level half of what yours was."
Oh, geez.
They get a reading of it on their machine. So they sent it down to pathology and it came back as 63 level.
So what's the normal levels?
Normal levels about 8 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
And my glucose 60.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
That's a fatal reading in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your ketones, she said, the patient that was in the bed before you only had ketones of 3.
Wow.
So what were, I said, my keto, she said, your ketones were 10. She said, seriously, she said, pick 6 numbers for the lottery. She said, technically, you should be dead.
Right.
She said, you should be dead.
Sheesh.
She said,
I mean, there's two ways of looking at that. You can look at it and say, technically she shouldn't be saying that, and it's a bit of a body blow, but at the same time, you're a Christmas miracle. You know,
yeah,
try to
true.
take the positives from it.
That's true.
But the amazing thing is, they transferred me to a ward. I mean, I would this actually was the Christmas miracle. 27th of December, like in the evening, I'd recovered so well up in intensive care. They transferred me down to a ward at 6 p.m. on the 27th, so 24 hours after coming round.
Right.
And the doctor that was on the ward when I came in, who came to read my notes and chat with me and find out what was going on, was my diabetes specialist.
Oh, there you go.
And he took one look at me and he said, "Yeah, you're doing well considering you nearly died."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "How do you feel now?" I said, "Well, I'll be glad when I can get home." He said, "Okay, give me 5 minutes and you can go."
Yeah. I think the thing is with diabetes and with DKA is that once you get the levels right again, then it's not like you need to be in hospital for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's a deadly imbalance, but it is an imbalance that can be corrected quite quickly if caught at the right time.
Which
that's the main thing with DKA. It's it's remembering to check your glucose levels and your ketone.
Being on top of things, yeah.
Yeah.
Like we were saying earlier about improvements in technology.
Yep.
Even 5 years ago, the only way you could see what your ketone levels were, it would be like low, medium, and get yourself to hospital quick because you need help.
Right.
Your level was to test your urine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was the only way you could see it.
Yeah.
Now you can actually do a finger prick.
Oh.
Blood. Put a strip in your ketone meter. 10 seconds later, it'll tell you exactly what it is.
So is that different from your CGM and your pump? Like that's a completely separate device?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking about diabetic ketoacidosis, but I wanted to ask our resident, somewhat medical professional if he can explain the
I love the
difference.
pain expression as you tried to say that.
Every time it's like,
I mean, you've massively set me up to fail here because I've never worked within diabetes. Um, okay, I'll try and explain it. So, ketosis is basically the process that occurs within your body which breaks down fat as opposed to glucose in terms of our energy supply. So, you've heard of the ketone diet, yeah?
oh yes.
Yeah.
So our body breaks down carbohydrates to create the glucose to be fed as fuel. Now, what the ketone diet does is gets rid of the carbohydrates, so there is no glucose in the body for the body to feed on, so it then feeds on fat. And that's why the keto diet works, because it is eating the body's fat reserves, because there's no sugar in the body glucose in the body that comes from the carbohydrates.
Yeah.
So that's what ketosis is. It's when the body is eating the fat rather than the sugar within the body. With diabetic ketone acidosis, what is happening is that the these things called ketones are created by the body, which are the fat-eating cells, but they become so prevalent within the bloodstream that basically the blood becomes acidotic.
Right.
And then that, obviously, if you've got acidotic blood, then that can attack the brain and it can cause all sorts of multi-organ failure. So that's why it's really dangerous to people.
It can do a hell of a lot of damage.
Oh yeah, you can. If you have a DKA which isn't treated, you can die from it. And the step down from that is you can have massive trauma to multiple organs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the easiest way of explaining what the two terms mean
Now,
without me having a degree in this area.
My follow-up to that is because my wife, like people obviously have talked about the keto diet now for a little bit. From my reading, ketoacidosis can still be developed if you aren't keeping up with, like, if you're doing the keto diet and you don't actually follow it properly. Is ketoacidosis still a
So ketoacidosis does exist outside of diabetic ketoacidosis.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why diets like this are really dangerous, because you will get influencers on Instagram saying, I lost 13 stone through using this diet. And it's like, that's great. But you're going to actually advertise this diet to someone who's going to take it to such a degree that they're going to really damage themselves. Whenever it comes to weight loss, I think it needs to be a healthy lifestyle change. It can't just be, I'm just going to do this ketone diet and I'm going to smash it and I'm going to be the most strict I've ever been for 6 weeks and I'm going to lose 8 stone in 6 weeks. If you're losing, obviously you're not going to lose that much weight, but if you're losing that much weight so quickly, it's not good for your body. Your body can't handle that kind of shock. We've all here had ulcerative colitis, and one of the big symptoms when you have a flare is massive weight loss. Me personally, I lost 14 kilograms in 4 weeks. And the result of that is that I was then weakened to a point where I could barely walk up a flight of stairs for the next 3 weeks. And I'm only now getting back to a point of the fitness I was at previously. So that amount of weight loss is unhealthy, and that's the key message to take away. So yes, ketoacidosis does exist if you abuse your body in such a way. Diabetic ketoacidosis is a different thing altogether, because that's linked into your diabetes and your body not producing insulin correctly. Now, we've had quite a chat at this point. It's been fantastically informative, but I'm afraid we're going to have to call it a day with one final question, Michael. So what would be the one message you could give to your 10-year-old self upon the diagnosis of diabetes?
Well, I would sort of give myself two messages.
We'll stretch to that. You can have two.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the 39-year-old me say to the 10-year-old me, don't believe the rubbish that some people will tell you over the next 29 years. If an expert, and I use that word lightly, an expert or an influencer tells you something, research it and do your own knowledge,
Always.
because you are as individual as that condition is to you.
100%.
That condition is going to be completely different to you than what it is going to be to the person in the next bed or in the next chair
Yes.
or sitting opposite you.
Yep.
So find out what works for you. Go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And the other bit of advice.
Don't be defined by the illness. Define your illness.
Exactly. Which leads me to my second bit of advice, which is a quote from a Harvard musician, mathematician by the name of Tom Lehrer, and he wrote a couple of novelty comedy albums in the 50s and 60s, and in the introduction to one of his songs called "We Will All Go Together When We Go," he talks about a friend of his called Henry. Made up story, of course, but he's saying that Henry got taken off to the Massachusetts State Home for the Bewildered. He said before he got taken off, he said Henry came up with a fantastic bit of philosophy, and he said, "Life is like a sewer. What you get out of it depends on what you put into it."
I like that.
And that's
fantastic.
That is something that I very much live by.
I like it.
If you put in the effort, you get the rewards.
I totally agree. We're starting to run real short on time here, so I'm gonna pass it over to Dan to wrap us up.
Well, there's nothing more to be said. What a fantastic quote to end on, Michael.
Yes,
Thank you
like
very
that.
much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for sharing your story, and we'll speak to you soon.
Catch you next time.
Brad and Dan talk shy.
Well, thank you, Michael. What a fantastic chat. I mean, I don't mean to be flippant, but fuck me, the guy picks his dates.
Hey.
So gets diagnosed with diabetes on World Diabetes Day, and gets his ulcerative colitis and what the PSC. I was going to say PCS there, but that's wrong. And then manages to probably achieve an award-winning fuck up of a Christmas by ending up in the ICU on Christmas Day / Boxing Day. I mean, if you don't like your parents cooking on Christmas Day, there's other ways around it.
Just a few.
So I mean, next level shithousery from him there. But in all seriousness, that must have been terrifying.
Totally.
You're at home with your parents. I imagine it's like just falling asleep, like blacking out, whatever, and then waking up with drips galore going into your arm and a nurse telling you you're lucky to be alive. That's
It's
yeah.
it's unsettling, honestly.
Yeah, I think unsettling is probably an understatement.
Yes, just a little bit.
But yeah,
But
I mean, it was only young when that happened as well. I
that's
mean,
so young.
that's
Like,
yeah,
it blows me away. Like, I was technically young when I was diagnosed with Crohn's, but man, some of these people being
You're
diagnosed,
you're still young.
these people being diagnosed as like kids, little kids, just blows me away what they have to go through leading into adulthood.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I mean, we've talked about this off air before, but I mean, we need to talk to some parents of kids with chronic illness at some point.
100%.
I'm not particularly interested in talking to the children because, you know, the children are irritating. This speaks. This is me speaking as a father of three, but certainly, I can't imagine what it must be like as a parent to
Yeah,
go through that.
scary stuff.
And it was. I thought it was interesting as well what Michael said about how him being 10 and not being given any information. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was 10, it's that age where you're still a kid, but you're fairly aware of the world around you.
Right.
It's not like you're so naive that you're 3 or 4 or 5. You do have a little bit of worldly knowledge. You are aware of what's happening on the news. You're aware of other things in society. So that, yeah, I get why that must have been so frustrating.
It's
You,
crazy.
I mean, you don't want a doctor to come in and say, yeah, you've got diabetes, it's going to fuck up your vascular system, you probably lose your legs by the time you're 60. You don't want someone come in and talk to you like that. But at the same time, you want some communication.
You need to know, because like not in the same degree, but I had a similar thing where like my mother dealt with my health for the first 2-3 years, and then after I left, I had no idea what happened during those years because she didn't remember. She didn't have it like down.
Yeah.
So like it's almost like just a blank zone that happened. And I literally just knocked off something that so for the last 20 years, I thought I had a drug allergy to Keflex, which is essentially penicillin. Like,
okay.
So I always had to have a different type of antibiotic. And then when I was going through all my stuff over the last couple years and being on antibiotics for a long time, one of my hospital trips, they brought it up again. And I was like, I'm just really not sure. This was something from before I had charge of my medical. So they gave me penicillin. We're in the hospital, safest place to do something like this.
It's a good place for that experiment. Yeah.
Knocked it off. I actually was fine. So now I've taken that off my medication list. Do not worry. But it's all because of that blank space in my medical history that I did not have control of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think there's also an argument with things like that medicine has come so far forward in the last 30 years.
So far.
So when I was a child, I've always been told I was allergic to aspirin.
Oh, really?
But it was because it was a treatment for asthma when I was little, and I had an asthma attack, and they gave me aspirin, and it got worse. Now, I've no idea if I'm actually allergic to aspirin. I've never really thought it'd be a good idea to try.
Yeah.
But it could well be that it was just unfortunate that that asthma attack got worse rather than better when they treated with aspirin, which is not something they do anymore. I think in the 80s, basically, medicine seemed to evolve to boil down to here's a painkiller, here's an aspirin, go to bed and see if you survive.
Totally.
Which we've moved on from. Which
thankfully
brings us on to the some of the things that Michael was talking about. With the tech changes, which I know you were keen on.
It's so I've been keen because, as you mentioned, with your father who was type 1 since being a child. Well, obviously still is. It doesn't go away.
I don't want to start talking about it in the past tense just yet.
My father has type 2, and I've been looking into these devices for a good year or so, and because he struggles with just the old school, like prick your thumb, and has had several diabetic, I don't want to say attacks, but like he's been in the hospital due
Hypos.
to, thank you, like
Hypos or hypers.
he's
Hypo is low blood sugar, hyper is high.
he screws himself over because he's not really good at controlling. So
my uncle, who's no longer with us, was type 2 diabetic, and it was purely down to his diet.
Yes.
And again, he was terrible at controlling it. Now, I do wonder with type 2 diabetes, and this is coming from a complete place of ignorance, and I'm just taking a sample size of 2, because type 2 diabetes you develop through poor lifestyle choices.
Yes.
Are those who develop type 2 diabetes more likely to then have issues in later life due to their diabetes because they're not willing to change their lifestyle choices, which have led them to that place?
I can totally see that.
This is not a scientific study.
No.
This is just a theory that popped into my head about 13 seconds ago, but it seems to make sense to me.
It also comes down to age, I think. Because when you're older, you're more set in your ways, like my father was. Like, he also smokes like a frickin' chimney and refuses to stop no matter how much it's hurting him. And again, it's the same thing of, I'm most of the way through my life. Why stop now? And it was the same with his diabetes. He's just like, I'm going to live my life and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, I think of that generation, there seems to be quite a reluctance, and again, this is on a very small sample size, so please, anyone over 65, don't abuse me on social media. Just do it in person. I get more of a kick out of it that way. There seems to be a much bigger resistance to seek medical help.
I would believe that.
And a much bigger resistance to talk about things. You talk about things, you're a snowflake. Snowflake's
Jeez, yeah.
Which is the most ludicrous term in the world, but that's an entirely different podcast. And I will get hate for that online. I'm gonna get
unfortunately
angry middle-aged white men saying, "Goddamn snowflake, talking about your feelings and health.
Yeah,
I'm made of steel." So I know you wanted to talk about the differences between type 1 and type 2. So essentially, type 1 is you're born with it. It's genetic.
It's a chronic illness.
It's nothing to do with the amount of Snickers you eat, or the amount of cans of Iron Brew you drink.
Yeah.
It is purely your body cannot produce enough insulin. And that's what it is. And it is a chronic illness.
Yes.
Type 2 diabetes is a chronic illness, but it is treatable generally by changing your lifestyle.
Well, that's it. I have a friend that actually is in that stage of, he was warned. You are now, what is it, pre-diabetic or onset diabetic? I can't remember what the exact...
I think it's pre-diabetic.
So he's at that stage where he needs to make a life change, or the type 2, like he's going to develop type 2. And
so is he still throwing down the
I would say he's trying. I think he has some ways to go, but he's never had to.
Of the podcast,
oh yeah,
political. Okay,
he's a close friend. I'm constantly on him. Like, I try to keep up with him and just give him like
I don't know him. I can be a bastard.
There you go.
As comes across regularly in this podcast. Put down the fork and go for a walk. So my uncle got type 2 diabetes. Within 10 years, he'd lost both legs. And within 2 years of that, he died.
That's
so
unfortunate.
It is serious, and you should take action if you can. I know it's not always the easiest thing.
No.
But small changes go a long way.
That's it. It's one little thing after another that snowballs into a bigger effect. Change
your diet, your cola for a Diet Cola.
Well,
it's have a bowl of cereal rather than having a packet of.
It kind of goes to something my mom or my dad and stepmom used to tell me, that I hated so much then that I now spout myself is everything in moderation. If it's a lot easier to deal with things that you have to limit yourself with by allowing yourself the odd treat here or there to just be like, oh, like I had it, now I'm going to like go back to status quo.
I mean, it goes back to what we were chatting about in the podcast about the keto diet. And it goes the other way. You know, you've got to moderate that way as well, or you can get ill with severe weight loss or whatever. And you know, if you know your crack usage just in moderation is fine.
There you go. It's all moderation.
All in moderation. Just a little bit of crack helps the medicine go down. I absolutely do not advise people start taking crack.
No.
Just to put it out there, I'm being sarcastic.
Yes.
We like to have a little bit of fun on this podcast, because I'm not actually all that miserable either. Kind of am. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. So I think we're kind of done there. I think we've kind of covered all the topics.
We did.
I think it's been a pleasure. I think we've learned some stuff.
Totally.
I had to do the hasty research of diabetic ketoacidosis at the end there, which, while having had 4 hours sleep and been awake for about 19 hours, I really appreciated, Brad, so thanks for that. If you want to throw me under the bus in future, just feel free. But anyway, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure, as always. We will be back in a couple of weeks. As
Indeed.
Is the I can't even think of my words. Is the plan from now on? Every Monday, the podcast will drop on Spotify.
Every other
and
Monday.
On YouTube. Every other Monday. Christ, I cannot speak. I need to go sit down in a darkened room and cry. If you want to get in touch, if you know anyone who is affected by chronic illness, or you have a story you want to share, you can share it in an email to us, or you can get in touch to be a part of the show.
Where can they find us?
Is at bdtalkingpod@gmail.com.
There you
or
go.
you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. All of our socials will be on the feed. That's it. Go away.
Have a good one, everyone. Later.
There is this guy from Canada called Brad, and a guy from Yorkshire, he's called Dan. They got together when the Bowels tried to kill them, and made this podcast to talk about their illness. Brad and Dan are talking shit. Brad and Dan are talking shit. Yes, Brad and Dan are talking shit to you and you and you.